When Canute died on the 12th of November 1035, he left behind an impressive legacy. He had a reputation for piety, had shown how to become reconciled with a conquered country, even choosing to be buried at Winchester 19 years after he had become King of England by force, and he had constructed a North Sea empire, incorporating England with Denmark and Norway. However, by 1035 the cracks in this empire were already showing, and his death led to them widening further. The most important issue was that of the succession in all three of the kingdoms he had ruled. This succession was far from simple, complicated hugely by Canute having children by two marriages. He had first married Elfgifu of Northampton during his father Sweyn Forkbeard's invasion of England in 1013-14, and then in 1017 he married Emma of Normandy. Elfgifu was still alive and stayed part of the royal court, as did their two young sons, Svein and Harold. However, there was a distinction between the two marriages. The marriage to Emma had been carried out in a church, and the marriage to Elfgifu had been a traditional hand-fasting ceremony, which was not recognised by the church. Canute's marriage to Emma had more than an edge of political expediency about it. However, whether Canute forced Emma into it, or she entered into the marriage willingly, is in doubt. Nevertheless, the political importance was not. This was because Emma, too, had been married before, to Ethelred II, the King of England who had died in 1016 during the course of Canute's invasion. Part of the wedding planning included an agreement that the offspring of the marriage between Canute and Emma took precedence when it came to the succession. This meant that Emma had effectively abandoned the claims of her own two sons, Edward and Alfred, from her previous marriage to Ethelred, who were living in exile in Normandy, something which was very helpful to Canute. And all this planning was set to pay off when Canute and Emma had a boy in 1018, who they called Harthacnut, but it didn't. In 1030, Elfgifu and Svein had been sent to Norway to serve as Canute's regents there, but this had gone terribly, and they were forced to flee in 1035 as the Norwegians threw their support behind Magnus of Norway, the son of the previous king, Olaf II, and Svein died in Denmark the same year. When Canute died in 1035, Harthacnut duly became king of Denmark, but he had the immediate problem of dealing with Magnus of Norway, who had not only seized the Norwegian throne, but was also willing to challenge Harthacnut for control of Denmark too. This threw the succession in England into doubt, and a council was immediately called in Oxford to resolve the issue. The two sides were clear. Harthacnut was supported by Emma, naturally, and also Godwin, the Earl of Wessex. Meanwhile, Canute's other son, Harold, was supported by Earl Leofric of Mercia, together with most of the north. To add fun to the negotiations, the rumour went around that Harold was not the genuine son of Canute. He was the son of a butcher, who had been smuggled into the royal bedchamber as Elfgifu was not able to have children. It is hard to imagine Canute not noticing something was wrong under these circumstances, and it is almost certain the rumours originated in Emma of Normandy's camp. The Oxford meeting led to a compromise. Harold would hold England as regent and control the land north of the Thames until such a time as Harthacnut could arrive from Denmark. Meanwhile, Emma and Earl Godwin would hold the south ready for his return. This uneasy balance was symbolised by the heads of both of the half-brothers appearing on the coinage for the first year of the reign. In 1036 there was still no sign of Harthacnut being able to free himself from Denmark, and Emma of Normandy's other sons made an appearance, possibly at her request, as she was losing hope in Harthacnut. Edward, the future confessor, landed at Southampton and ran into some local forces willing to fight him. He won the battle, but realised he had too little support to press further and returned to Normandy. Edward's younger brother Alfred landed near Dover before setting off inland. However, he was quickly headed off and captured by Earl Godwin of Wessex. Many of Alfred's men were killed or mutilated, because that's just how you treat prisoners in the 11th century. Alfred himself was blinded and put into custody in Ely Abbey, where he died of his injuries in February 1037. Whilst the chronicles disagree on many of the finer details, especially the extent to which Earl Godwin was responsible for the death of Alfred, the event is hugely significant. In the short term, it marked Earl Godwin switching sides and abandoning Harthacnut in favour of Harold. In turn, this allowed Harold to further secure his position in England. With Harthacnut still stuck in Denmark and the most powerful earls all now supporting him, Harold decided to act in 1037. He drove Emma of Normandy out of Winchester, and she fled to Bruges in Flanders for safety, and Harold established himself as king of all England. There was only one head on the coin now. The rest of Harold's reign was largely quiet, except for a battle at Welshpool in 1039, where a rising Welsh prince, Gruffydd ap Llywelyn, first tested the strength of the English borders. He withdrew back into Wales, but not before doing serious damage to the English forces. Edwin, the brother of Earl Leofric of Mercia, was killed in the battle, along with numerous other thanes. Meanwhile, over in Denmark, Harthacnut had been busy negotiating with Magnus of Norway. They reached an agreement sometime in 1038-39 that they would accept each other's positions as King of Denmark and King of Norway respectively, and that they would become one another's heirs should they die childless. This led to the war ending, and freed Harthacnut to set about returning to England to secure his inheritance there. He moved to Bruges in 1039, where he joined up with his mother Emma of Normandy, and set about preparing a fleet and men. It seemed likely that invasion would follow. However, England was spared an invasion in 1040 by Harold doing the decent thing and dying, on the 17th of March. This allowed Harthacnut to travel to England unopposed, to become king. However, Harthacnut's reign did not prove to be the smoothest. For a start, there was his relationship with Earl Godwin. Godwin, the most powerful nobleman in England, had abandoned Harthacnut's cause in 1036 and decided to throw his support behind Harold's. He had also been implicated in the murder of Alfred, who was the son of Emma of Normandy, which made Alfred and Harthacnut half-brothers. Godwin managed to work his way out of this difficult situation by giving Harthacnut a warship, fully armed and manned with 80 men. Part peace offering and part statement of how powerful he was, this convinced Harthacnut to forgive him and let him retain his lands. In reality, Harthacnut needed him. Harthacnut also needed money. He had raised a significant fleet and army to support his claim to the English throne, having settled his differences with Magnus of Norway. As England had been the reason he needed this, he decided England should pay for it. So he taxed the country heavily, £21,000 in 1040 and then another £11,000 in 1041. Two heavy tax demands in as many years prompted discontent in the country. Having sent 2 royal huscarls as tax collectors to Worcester in 1041, the locals expressed their unhappiness by murdering them. Harthacnut could have taken this as a sign to call off the taxes. Instead, he called in the earls, including Godwin, to sack the city and assert his authority. Most of the population managed to flee to the countryside and escaped harm. However, their homes and Harthacnut's popularity were burned. The king's popularity took a further hit in 1041, when Edward III, Earl of Bernicia and claimant to the earldom of Northumbria, was murdered. Edwulf had been travelling under royal safe conduct at the time, and Harthacnut's apparent failure to protect him, or even complicity in the murder, went down badly. Nevertheless, Harthacnut had improved his relationship with Siward, the Earl of Northumbria appointed by Canute, who was now unchallenged in his position. Perhaps realising that he was on few people's Christmas card list by this point, he decided to call Edward the Confessor over to England in the summer of 1041. Edward was Harthacnut's other half-brother, and had a strong claim to the throne as he was the son of Ethelred II. It is probable that Edward was intended to serve as regent whilst Harthacnut attended to matters in Denmark, and also was nominated as his heir, thus going back on the agreement with Magnus of Norway from 2 years earlier. Before the arrangement had chanced to become fully clear, Harthacnut managed to enjoy the wine too heartily at a wedding reception and died of a stroke on the 8th of June 1042. With Magnus of Norway busy establishing his position as King of Denmark, Edward the Confessor was recognised as the rightful King of England. Many were glad to have an Anglo-Saxon king again, and few mourned the death of Harthacnut. Indeed, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle's judgment of Harthacnut's rule was brutally short. He did nothing worthy of a king for as long as he reigned. Thank you for watching, and take care.